Life can bring us down, but turn it all around. Life can bring us
My mom convinced my dad to let us go to a Christian church because she realized that we didn't know other people believed in God, which is, at least for me, incredibly true. So I ended up going to I believe they were a fundamentalist Christian church. And so I'm going to Christian church like 3 days a week, but I'm going home. And my dad's like, but don't take any of that seriously because what really is important is this cult belief system. So he was still teaching us that at home. So I have like a very interesting experience of being like cult and also being raised in a Christian church.
Interesting. Hello and welcome to the Apostate Coalition. My name is Jonathan. I'll be your host for today. We love to conduct interviews on this channel, and we hope that you'll find this one interesting. We are having a discussion with Cirrus, so let's give a hearty welcome to Cirrus.
Hello. My particular background is that in my early childhood, I was raised with the belief system of the Nation of Yahweh, which, if you don't know, is a Black supremacist hate group. They were really popular in, I think, like the early 90s, late 80s. If you're looking for like a lot of deep information about it, I know that Dan Cummings' YouTube podcast, Timesuck, does a really great in-depth episode about it. But long story made short, my dad was very into that cult when I was a very small child. And after a couple of years of practicing in isolation, I and my family ended up going to a fundamentalist Christian church. So I was going to a fundamentalist Christian church during the week, but also continuing to get these cult Black supremacist lessons at home.
That's a bit of a change in beliefs there.
My dad had joined them during like the height of like their notoriety. So my very early childhood especially was super inundated with this belief system. And then the cult leader got arrested, so we were told not to talk about it. That has some long-lasting implications on my life. And after a little bit of like learning in private, like we had a very like private religious practice. And
that's better.
Okay. I was like, did I do that? Because I accidentally pressed my keyboard. No. So I think when I was in second grade, my mom convinced my dad to let us go to a Christian church because she realized that we didn't know other people believed in God, which is, at least for me, incredibly true. So I ended up going to I believe they were a fundamentalist Christian church. And so I'm going to Christian church like 3 days a week, but I'm going home. And my dad's like, but don't take any of that seriously because what really is important is this cult belief system. So he's still teaching us that at home. So I have like a very interesting experience of being like cult and also being raised in a Christian church.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, it's I identify as a cultist because of my relationship with my dad, and those cult beliefs were in a large part a bonding point for the two of us as well. Mm-hmm. I know some of my siblings, one in particular, really relates to being like an ex-Christian, which makes a lot of sense for them in their life story. But for me, very much, I was like, even though we weren't like going in community with other people, because I was still being taught this at home and it was by like the parent I was closest to, that's very much what I related to and the lens I saw the rest of the world through. I feel so kind of awkward about it. It's almost like being like, it's not like being biracial, but it's like being raised in a multicultural home, except it's just two different extreme religious beliefs.
Yeah, you got some experiences, didn't you?
Yeah, it was odd, man.
Interesting.
It was interesting because it's like, I think my mom was always like Christian, and because of her Christian beliefs, she stayed with my dad. And so we're going to Christian church, and my dad's like, that's cool, I love your mom, and I'll listen to her and let that happen. But make sure that you understand not to take any of that seriously. What's really important is that you remember that you are God's chosen people, only Black people. Don't listen to anything they say. We're doing this to be nice to your mom. Which, and I took that to heart because the parent I was closest to as a child was my dad. He was my primary caretaker in a lot of ways, and we were incredibly close. So while I have some siblings that really relate more to the fundamentalist Christian experience we had, for me, it was very much about all of the cult teachings we got through early childhood up until the end of high school at home.
Yeah, sorry, viewers, if I seem a little unprepared. You can actually see where I just got up. I have where my face was on something. I overslept in my alarm. Yeah. So
it's awkward hours
for
both
dedication
of us.
to the cause.
That it looks nice.
Yeah, there you go. At least it's fashionable.
Yeah.
That's dedication to the cause. Just jump out of bed and throw on some clothes, and here you go. Were there any experiences that you had while in the group that you found you really liked?
Okay, for me, well, the closest to my dad, it made me feel incredibly special. And I just thought it gave me this inner sense of calm where no matter what other people said about me, it didn't matter because I knew I was really cool and really special and that God loved me very specifically and really almost no one else, and that was fine.
That sounds very familiar.
Yep.
That seems to be an XJW thing. The more
I look into other cults, the more that's a common trait. But for me, it was that Black people, in particular, the Black people in America are God's chosen people. And there are other minorities are also in there because they're other tribes and stuff, but not white people. We have to kill all of them.
Oh.
Very specifically, a lot of my childhood was about be prepared because when God comes back, it's about killing people, and you're gonna have to kill all of God's enemies, which are just white people in particular.
Okay.
Yeah. But another thing I really liked though was learning to study. That's how I learned to read this way. My dad had us use the Bible to learn to read, but we didn't just read with the Bible. He had us learn how to use a dictionary at the same time because his whole thing was read with understanding and learn with understanding. He was very serious about that. So, we can I'm in pre-K, but one of my siblings is in first grade and we're learning how to read by reading the Bible with the dictionary. Good times. But
I'm imagining you as a little kid basically doing Samuel Jackson's part from Pulp Fiction.
And I will strike down upon thee with great vengeance and furious anger those who attempt to poison and destroy my brothers. And you will know my name is the Lord when I lay my vengeance upon thee.
Kind of. It was so weird looking back, especially because my dad taught us the Lord's Prayer, which in retrospect, why? But also because we were taught that this was such a important thing, this was a big secret, that the reason Black people were treated so badly is because we were actually God's chosen people, and everyone was really jealous of that. So I grew up thinking this was a secret prayer that people didn't know. Yeah, it was wild, going to church and seeing other people pray this. I was like, whoa, my God.
But it's in the book.
Yeah, but I thought it was a secret. We were really isolated as small children, which is weird.
It's way in the back, so no one gets there.
As a small child, we couldn't watch TV. We couldn't go anywhere unsupervised. So I mean, obviously we were very small, so we shouldn't be. But
you weren't allowed to watch TV, you say?
No, my relationship with media has been a very fun and interesting journey for me. But early childhood, I had to sneak to watch TV. We had a TV, but we could only watch it at certain hours of the day. We could only watch things that my parents had pre-approved, which was a show or two that my mom really liked at night. Or if we were watching something, it was because my parents felt it taught us something. So I remember I got to watch the first 2 or 3 episodes of Voltron because God, Jesus. Okay. So my parents, my dad in particular, would often use like media as allegories. So I watched Planet of the Apes. I watched the first couple episodes of Voltron, and I got to watch David Lynch's Dune before like first grade. I had seen all of that movie because
I just rewatched that about a month ago. And I'm like, wow, this is a weird movie.
Yeah, like it's one of my favorite movies, but it's in part because of the experience I had learning about like life and the world and how things work. And it's really funny because that whole movie, the whole book series is about how saviors and like holy wars are bad. And that's not what my dad took from that. My dad used it to show about like secret chosen people and holy wars are good. So like literally the polar opposite of what that movie and what that book is about. But it works.
Meanwhile, he's like, honey, I got this here gum jabbar. You better not move.
Like
we're gonna teach you.
It was so important though. Like one of my favorite memories, one of the last really good times I had with my dad is we were watching The Hobbit, Battle of Five Armies, which once again, like The Hobbit was something that my dad let us watch as a kid, so I got to see that. But so we're watching that movie, and this giant worm jumps out of the ground, and without looking at each other, with no context, we just both look, shy hulud.
Okay.
And my mom's like, what? And we're just like, it would take so long to explain. Like, we're just not gonna do that. But like that's how in sync we were. Like that's how like in tune we were. And I guess in some ways how in tune I was because he raised me to be in tune with him like that.
So you had a special relationship for sure.
Yeah. But and all of those beliefs were a part of that. He was all about like learning to look at things differently and looking for deeper hidden meanings and things. Like I remember he had my older sibling on a very special like reading track. Like there were certain books they were supposed to read in school. He's like, don't read that. Read this instead because this one is all about like looking at the world from a different perspective. So I and my older sibling in particular were like really deeply entrenched in like religious belief systems and these deep religious thoughts, especially that my father had. So it really rubbed off on us in similar ways where we're both really intent and we both really love reading because reading was one of the few things we could do unsupervised as a kid, and really, really into like studying and like certain ways of studying because that's something that was really impressed upon us both from my dad. And then later when we went to this fundamentalist church, they had this whole like Bible competition where you could like you had to memorize certain parts of the Bible and then like get quizzed on it and you could win awards and things like that. And they had a very
I would have failed that.
Here's my
I was not good at scripture. That was not my thing.
My older sibling was. They could memorize entire books of the Bible. But me, like, no, because it was all New Testament. And my dad was all Old Testament. So if you asked me a question about the Old Testament, I could do that. But I couldn't be bothered to memorize all this stuff about the New Testament. But I did like the way that they taught you to like color code your notes so that it was easy for like quick memory recall. And I use that to this day in anything I study. Everything is like this color coding system that I learned from that like biblical study quiz game.
It's funny the things that will stick with you from your time as a youth. And just follow you right into adulthood.
Yeah, for me, the things that really stuck, like my constant fight to gain access to media, which wasn't a huge fight, but it's very interesting. Like I love, like obviously a deeper love for like looking at things differently and seeing the deeper meaning in things was partially instilled in me from my parent. I said that like I don't have a mom. I do.
So how was your relationship with your mother? Was it just
very tumultuous? And I think it's in part because I was so close to my dad and because we're so similar in a lot of ways. And they don't, I would not say that they're the most optimal people for each other, but there is care there. and a deep companionship. But I think the fact that I was so close made her to my dad made her uncomfortable, that she wanted, she wanted to have a little girl that was like close to her.
Right.
And I was not that. And I think that
she's always off talking about Dune with dad.
Yeah, we had a lot of really dumb inside jokes that she did not like. It was to the point where we did. If I were to go visit my parents today, this very moment, I could not be alone in a room with my dad for longer than 10 minutes. It makes her uncomfortable. It makes her think that we're plotting against her somehow. It was a point of contingency between the two of us. She convinced all of my other siblings that if my dad and I agree on something, it must mean that we're both lying. So my siblings don't often trust anything I say unless it's corroborated by an outside source, because they think I'm either really gullible or they think my dad and I are corroborating on something. Yeah, my mom and I don't have like the greatest relationship. It's complicated, and I think in part it is because my dad was my primary caregiver really as a kid for a couple reasons. My mom worked a lot, and my dad made a point to be at home more, and as a result, we just knew each other better. And I'm really dancing around a lot of other complicated situations in my family growing up. I mean, and obviously my parents being on different pages in a lot of ways with their religious beliefs exacerbated that. Yeah, my dad was never exactly happy about my mom going to church, especially because, he's very overt about how much he does not believe in Jesus. So the church used to always talk about my dad and my mom, like they'd be like, they're unevenly yoked. If you've ever heard that phrase.
Yes, I've heard that quite a bit.
They would talk about it like my mom had cancer. Like it was very uncomfortable.
Wow.
Like, yeah, it was weird. They would like whisper about it as if, oh, that poor unfortunate thing, she's unevenly yoked.
It's funny the terminology that you find in different groups that just you're like, oh, you guys have that too, or
That's the thing, right? When you leave a group like that, you have to learn that other people don't talk like this at all, and you have to be like, oh, yeah, okay, so that's not normal. Okay.
Yeah, there's a whole lot of not normal in these different groups.
Yeah.
It's a little weird. And that's why I think it's important that people who have had different experiences, whether it be ex-Mormon, ex-JW, ExFundie, whatever, talk about these things, show their similarities in some of the experiences, and kind of fight against these influences, collectively.
Yeah.
Because there's only so many, and there's, you get enough people together and you can really make a difference. So
that's one thing I found interesting, right? Because it's like I said, I was raised with this belief system, and it took a very long time to dismantle it. I would say I've only been like fully like away from that way of thinking for maybe about 10 years. And there are still times when I find myself being like, that is a racist thought. And it's just so like deep down ingrained in me that it's something that you don't think about, right? But yeah, where was I going with this? Shoot. Oh yeah, but there is like a lot of overlap, which you don't realize. Like when I first decided to like just cut this out of my life completely, I went looking for other people who were a part of the Yahweh. I always call it Yahweh Ben Yahweh. That is not what it's called. It's called Nation of Yahweh. So I called it that because this was the thing since pre-K, and that was the name of the leader. I distinctly remember when he got arrested because I thought they arrested God. That's how that's how important this was. Like that day is burned in my brain forever. I'll circle back to that in a second. But when I first left, I thought, I'd try to find other people talking about, leaving this cult, and there's like almost nothing. Like it's a thing. You see people film, I don't know what they would call them, like the proselytizers that go out on the street and like angrily yell at people and tell all the white people are going to hell. You see videos like that. I've only seen like 1 or 2 videos where someone was a part of this group and they left. One was someone who was a child like me, and ironically, that person also
not a huge
really...
representation. Excuse me, not a huge representation on that front.
Yeah. It's not a lot at all. And the few I did find were mostly Christians talking about it, like Black Christians who are aware it's a thing, but like only 1 or 2 videos where it's like a person who was in it now out. So I ended up finding a lot of like, atheists that came from Christianity, atheists who came from Jehovah's Witnesses. I was like, oh, there's a lot of overlap here. So that was cool. And it's nice to have that support system and be like, even though my experience was kind of unique, in so many ways it wasn't. And I find that comforting and sad. I wish less people didn't go through this. Like,
that's
I have
true.
Some experiences where people think I'm lying because they were so intense. And I'm like, I'm glad that this sounds that insane to you. I'm glad that you can't imagine a world where someone would do this. I guess so. To circle back to the day that this cult leader got arrested, because that changed a lot of the way I view things and talk about things versus my other sibling who was around my age at the time. So we come home from school and we see this guy getting arrested on the news. And my dad turns it off and looks us dead in the eye and tells us, we cannot talk about this belief system we have, because if we do, we will be killed. Like, that was a thing. Like, these people, a part of this cult, were going around killing people with like machetes and stuff.
Oh, man.
It was. I was vaguely aware of that, but this is my dad. This is my world. My world is my parents and my school that was like 2 blocks down the road. So it's just like, I took that super serious. That meant like we could never talk about this. So I'm being taught to be very proud of this belief system, but also like never talk about it. My other sibling at the time took that as, oh, they'll just kill our dad because he was the only one that was like a card-carrying cultist.
Oh my goodness.
I know. I find that wild. I found that out maybe like a year or 2 ago. So I lived most of my life in like this low level of constant fear that if I say the wrong thing, someone's going to come and axe my whole family. And this other sibling, no, not at all. They just went about their life like that, and I was like, oh, it explains a lot of differences between us.
That's pretty scary.
Yeah, but I don't know. You get used to living with a certain level of fear, right? Where you have this constant idea of like, if you do something wrong, if you say the wrong thing, something or someone somewhere is going to hurt you, or there's going to be some negative consequence that you can't walk back from. And eventually that just becomes normal, and you just learned that you're fine with it. You're not really. You're coping in many other ways that are not healthy. But at the time, it just becomes a part of your normal. So it does become something that's in the background. It
seems that fear is a common thread with a lot of these groups. And what you have just said there feels very familiar, because you're always sort of like walking on eggshells about your conduct and your thoughts. And, am I going to be in trouble? And then do I need to talk to the elders? And am I going to have consequences about that way? And, some places where being Jehovah's Witness is illegal, they have that extra fear on there because they're the persecuted chosen people. And, like in Georgia or, like in Russia and certain areas, their fear of being arrested or thrown in prison. And, it's control. Yeah. It's like, there's the real life fear that you have, but also the manufactured fear that blends with the very real terror of your situation. Like for me, I didn't have
actual police and actual like persecution. That, I mean, in theory, yes, possibly someone could have come and axed my family, but the chances of that were so astronomically low, especially the longer and longer this cult leader was in jail. So it's just like, I understand my dad being afraid at the beginning, but I don't think he took into consideration that I was like in preschool. I must have been like 4. And like, you take those sort of things incredibly serious. I just, that's just burned in my brain forever, to the point where to this day, I'm still a little afraid of talking about it. And I force myself to talk about it because it's like, I have to, for my own self-healing. I have to acknowledge that what happened was not good. Even if my parents were doing their best, it wasn't good. And I have to accept that. So it's like, that's why I'm like, I'm a cultist. That's the way that I was a cultist. That's the primary experience.
Recovering cultist, right?
Yes, thank you. Because it's the thing that colored most of my life. Like, so it's just, and I have to accept that it's okay. That chances of somebody coming and axe murdering me over it is probably astronomically low.
Glad it's on the low side.
But but in the situation you were talking about, it's just like, there is the real fear of going to jail, but it's also mixed with like, the added fear from the religion that doesn't need to be there. And it's just, it blurs the line between like real dangers and fantasy dangers.
I think it's important what you were saying too about family, how you basically have to, you need to worry about yourself. And even though you look up to your parents, most cases, you still have to think about your own well-being. And, you may think, I'm going to disappoint my family, or I could lose my family because of it. You still have to look out for yourself because it's your life and it's all you got. And to continue to be a part of that is just giving up your true self, your potential for who you should be or could be.
In my experience, for me personally, I don't talk to my dad at all. I'm very low contact with my mother. And that's mostly because she keeps texting me. That's not a bad thing I wouldn't tell her this, but it's not a bad thing on her part, I think, because she's not being overly pushy. And she does tell me things that are important, things I wouldn't know because I don't have contact with the majority of my family. And that's my personal choice because it's the safest thing for me. Being in that environment, it was constantly chaotic. There was very little separation between family members, between what was your life choice, your ability to move forward, and what was good for the entire unit. So it was very hard for there to be any individual growth. My parents used to always drill into us that we could not trust anyone outside of our immediate nucleus family. And we had some early life experiences that only really made them double down on that belief. But it made it very difficult to grow as people, because in order to grow, you have to expand your boundaries. Like, that's just naturally going to happen as you get older. And my parents, my dad in particular, fought that tooth and nail. Did everything he could in his power to keep us isolated from the rest of the world, to make sure that even if we did engage with the rest of the world, that we were so indoctrinated into the idea that we can only engage so far. And
be in the world, but no part of the world, right?
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. So an example, I suppose, would be that my parents, especially when I was young, really hammered home that if we were ever gay in any way or brought home someone that wasn't Black, we would be just completely cut out of the family. The end. And I took that to heart because I was a good kid and I didn't want to break my parents' heart, and I didn't want to be isolated from this family unit, which was the only thing we had in this world. So I ended up meeting someone that I really liked. We could have had a really good relationship. And I told them straight to their face that I like them, but they're white, so I can never date them because my parents will never talk to me again. And God bless that guy for just taking that in stride, because that's quite a thing for someone to look you dead in the face and say with just complete certainty. Like, that's not weird.
Yeah.
So my parents did, like, one of my siblings did end up dating someone white, and they did not keep to their word on that. Yeah, they were very uncomfortable about it, but they let it go. So a part of me was a little frustrated. That's like one of the cracks, right? Where it's just like, I followed the rules and I let go of a potentially great friendship, not only just a good relationship, but a great friendship, because I was afraid of my parents' retribution. But it turns out they don't keep their word. So if they don't keep their word, what was the purpose of me isolating myself from this potentially great relationship where I was,
Right.
Had someone that I could talk to about books and like theories and nature, and it's just like gone.
That's where you look back and you have those regrets about what could have been.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody who's like myself, I didn't go to college or anything like that. I just did high school. And I remember when I was graduating, talking to my dad saying, like, I need to pioneer. I didn't end up pioneering, but that was where my focus was, is not go to school. It was go out in service. And, just life carried me in a certain direction. But, who knows where I'd be? Like, I had aspirations to be an architect maybe, or an animator for, oddly enough, for Don Bluth Studios. Because I was
at the time that made that, yeah.
Because I was like, I remember watching The Secret of Nim and like The Land Before Time. I was like, I like these movies.
Yeah, they were really good. Like, for you,
they're real tearjerkers.
Those of you in the audience who don't know, go look up some Don Bluth movies, especially the early ones. Great masterpieces.
Yeah, they were really good.
For me, I've had an interest in music since before school. I was one of those kids where oh yeah. So like, I remember this day, another day burned in my brain. So I was saying a lot as a kid, because you're a kid and you babble. That's fine. So my parents invited me into the living room because they had a guest over, and when they had like an adult guest, we weren't allowed in the room, whatever. But they wanted me to come in and sing for this person. I don't remember like this person's name or anything, but I come in and I sing. And this lady goes, "Oh, you have such a pretty voice. You should go to school for that." And I was like, you can go to school for singing? And in that minute, I was like, well, I know what I'm doing for the rest of my life. Right? Like, I'm going to sing, and I'm going to sing the hardest thing there is, which at the time I just assumed was opera, which I don't even know how I knew what opera was, to be honest. But I was like, that's it. That's what I'm doing. So I pursued that relentlessly. And despite everything, I now teach voice as a teacher. Like, I credit that a lot with the teachers I had in school. They noticed that I had a real thirst for learning.
I feel like busting out some Ave Maria here.
I haven't warmed up, but I could sing a little something if you wanted. It's my belief that if you are a musician, you should have something in your back pocket ready to go at all times. It doesn't have to be the most popular thing, but you should have something. So that's a professional tip for you, young, aspiring people out there. Have an audition piece just always in your back pocket ready to go. You should be able to just sing it while you're washing the dishes.
Yeah.
Like, I'm being dead serious. So
keep that in mind.
Yeah, like my teachers, I was very lucky. I had teachers that noticed that I was really invested, and they took a lot of time out of their day in their life to make sure that I didn't fall through the cracks, and I credit them with a lot of the good in me. I had a teacher that noticed I was really interested in singing, and typically voice lessons, an hour-long voice lesson with a good teacher is like $50. You can find like good places that have like the school I teach at is more about making sure people have the opportunity to learn. So the lessons are always discounted, and there's more ways to get them discounted. But if you don't have those options, and the minimum you're paying is like $50 an hour for, like, in my opinion, a good teacher, or even more, depending on your location and things. But this teacher just taught me for free, just to be kind. Just because she knew I was interested. So even though I was going to school 5 days a week, on Sundays, I would walk halfway across the city to her house to have a free voice lesson.
Nice.
Which, if you're a musician and you usually are working on Sundays, because you're usually working in some sort of like religious church or something like that, So she was coming back from like a second or third job just to teach me for free. God bless that woman. Like, I had so many teachers go out of their way to make sure that I was okay. And I'm really grateful for that. Yeah.
So you,
That.
so
Go ahead.
were you singing as a child?
Yes,
A lot?
I
Okay.
all the time, all the time. So I started going to school for singing when I was age 11,
Oh, okay.
and mhm, and I really got into like the science of how your body works when you sing. So I had a teacher that was into that, so she made a point to she taught that to us because she could, and noticed that I was really into it, so she continued making sure I learned that. My first job was being a Christmas caroler, which was funny because once again, not religious. So I had like not Christian rather. So I had to get special permission for that. Despite the fact that I was going to Christian church, but I wasn't a Christian, I had to give special permission to do this job. It was so weird. But yeah, I sang any and every opportunity I could. I even had like a concert outfit in my locker at school all the time, ready to go, just in case, because I took it that seriously.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. And like my parents weren't as supportive as one would hope. Like they were like, that's your thing, that's cool. But I couldn't sing in the house. There were too many people couldn't sing in the house, too many people all the time doing other things. They might take me to a performance, but they wouldn't pick me up, or they'd say they'd pick me up and then they just wouldn't. Or my dad was very explicit that he hated like musicals and stuff. So he was like, I'll drive you to and from rehearsals, but I will not be at your performances, which at least he told me that and was honest. So I always gave him a pass on that, as opposed to my mom, who was like, I'll be there, and then just didn't.
I'll be there.
Like legit, like I have so
Everything
many
I hear
memories.
is a song lyric.
No, I do
that
that
way.
too. Like
Yeah.
every moment of melody. Yeah, I feel that. But yeah, I have lots of memories of just being at the school 30, 40 minutes after everyone else has left, just me and a lone security guard waiting for my mom. It's just like cool. And then she pretended
So you've
that
got
like
this.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. So you've got this experience being in a cult and in a fundamentalist religion, and then you kind of separated from all that, and then you're now, I would say, pursuing your dreams.
Yeah, like I was always trying to, but I think my big issue was that with my religious beliefs, it was that one day my dad or God is going to choose a man for me. So even as a tiny child, one of my earliest memories was being like fretting about being a professional and having a family. Like I wasn't even a double digit, and this was a concern of mine. But I've always been that kind of kid. I was in second grade worried about SAT scores. But it's just like that kind of waffling and not feeling like I could fully pursue my dreams. And also with my parents kind of halfway supporting me, but not all the way supporting me, like saying it's cool, but we're only gonna get you so far. So I had a lot of like mixed feelings about what I should be doing and how I should be pursuing what I wanted to do in life. And also pursuing what I wanted to do meant I had to open up my boundaries, which might be, in retrospect, part of the reason my dad wasn't as keen. Like he wanted to support me living my dreams, but he also wanted me to stay his isolated child forever. Anytime my boundaries opened up, in particular with something to do with media or art, I could just see a light die in his eyes. It was always just a little miserable whenever I got access to like television or watched a documentary on media or something. Like my favorite movie as a kid was In Search of Dr. Seuss, which is all like this made for television documentary about Dr. Seuss. And my dad was just sad. Like I remember that he was just like a little part of him died when I got access to television. That's how he worded it. But
he's sad in the house and sad with a mouse.
Sad in a box and sad with a fox.
Yeah.
But like just pursuing my dreams and having teachers who were determined to get me opportunities, just determined to make sure that I wasn't like in a box somewhere. Like church was fine, like this fundamentalist church. They really want to keep you isolated too. So they had like, they would let you pursue your goals of like art and music and science as long as it benefited the church. They were so intense about this. They even had like arts competitions that were only for members of this very specific like denomination. So it was like, you don't have to go to like art competitions. You don't have to go to art school. You can just stay here in this particular like church and never go anywhere, which was wild. Once again, thank God I had teachers, because my teachers were like, if you're good at something, get paid for it. Don't do it for free. Yeah. So the church I was going to was like, God gave you a gift and it's your job to use that gift for God, but only here at this specific church and nowhere else. Which
that sounds very familiar too.
Because of my teachers, I was able to see through that, because it was like, yeah, you know what? Even if God gave me the clay, I'm the one that molded it into this beautiful vase that I'm using to do like to carry whatever I want in it. So you don't get that for free. You're not helping me build this thing. I'm building this thing, and I'm going to use it for what I want, which of course was seen as like terribly evil. That reminds me, actually. So because my dad was not a Christian, but my mom was heavily involved in this church, he would often do things with the church. So they would begrudgingly take his help. And one of the times they begrudgingly took his help is they did this thing called like a hell, what do they call it? A hell house, which was that's not how it was advertised to us. It was advertised as the church is doing like a haunted house, but for Jesus.
Oh.
But what it is hell houses are like, they advertise themselves as haunted houses, and then it's like, surprise, this is what the world will be like without Jesus, and don't you want to like get saved? So kids and families think they're going to like a haunted house on Halloween, and it's not that at all. So they cast my dad and
hookers and drug addicts.
Oh, it's great. Like some of them can be really creative, but also most of the time they're just traumatic. I brought this up because my dad volunteered because my mom wanted him to. So they had he and I in a skit where we were playing the unbelievers who were going to get left behind in the rapture. And that's the scary thing. The rapture is going to happen. Yeah. And everyone you love is going to disappear. And my dad did not take this seriously, and neither did I. So I'm supposed to be sitting in a sermon and being like a bad kid that's not listening. So for some reason, I had a portable toothbrush in my pocket, and I pulled it out and started brushing my teeth during the middle of this sermon.
As so you do.
People are just laughing. And then at the end, when like everyone's like raptured, I'm like, oh no, everyone's gone. But my dad, who's playing like a father who's been left behind and his whole family's gone, he's like, wait, what the hell are y'all? He's just saying wild shit, just wild, completely wild off the wall things. People are laughing and giggling. We got in a lot of trouble for that.
At least you're having fun with it.
We were, but they were like, we're supposed to be scaring them into believing in Jesus. My dad was like, why would I do that?
You don't know me, do you?
Yeah, they're like, okay, so you guys can be here, but you can't talk anymore.
Oh, that's funny. So I just wanted to talk about like how you have taken yourself out of that negative environment of your youth, and now you as an adult. So you're pursuing, your musical aspirations.
Okay. So the main thing there were two main things that really helped me break out of it in the long term. One, it was just meeting other people and expanding my boundaries. A core memory is I used to take the bus when I was in school with this kid that was like complete goth, the kind of kid that your parents always tell you to stay away from. He was so nice. He was just a nice person and just so warm and loving. And it was just like, okay, people aren't as bad as my parents have said they were. And we had experiences where like you felt like you shouldn't talk to people, but like it was just like, how can the whole world be so bad if this kid's in it? He's great. Like he had to come from somewhere. And another thing was that all of the education that my parents were drilling into me about learning how to study, But when I used those skills in a way that they didn't appreciate, I got smacked down for it. Prime example, there's a story in the Bible about the tribe of Benjamin and how the rest of the tribes of Israel go, like, we're not going to deal with you anymore because what you did was so heinous. So they swore to God that they wouldn't let them marry their daughters. And then the tribe starts to die out. So they're like, we can't let them die because they're our family, but we also can't break our word because we gave our word to God. So they just go and like rape and pillage another town and steal the women and give them to the tribe of Benjamin. And it was a moment in my life where I was just like, this story is not for me. This story is here not because it's a good thing that happened, but because it's a historical moment that happened that needs to be known. And I was very proud of myself for coming up with that and being like, you know, this isn't a good thing that happened. And it's not here because it was a good thing. It's here because it's something that needs to be, you know, it's a record that needs to be documented. So I told my dad that, and I immediately got like talked down to for it. It was told that's not true. Everything in the Bible has an objective meaning and a meaning specifically for we, the Black people who are God's chosen people. So I obviously read it wrong. And the lesson I took from that was don't talk to my dad about things that matter to me. Like clearly, like there's a disconnect. And that was one of the beginning phrase of our relationship where I was just like, I couldn't talk to him about my insights into the world. And if I can't talk to him, who could I talk to? So just experiencing the world and realizing that it's not a big, scary place. And
I think that's very important because as an ex-Jehovah's Witness, or, you know, when you're a Jehovah's Witness, you're taught that the world, everybody else is worldly. That's the term that they use. And everything is scary and evil and bad. And, you know, like you're saying, just because somebody's got a lot of eyeliner on doesn't make them a bad person. You know, there's plenty of good people out there. You just have to find them.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? Like my life, despite a lot of the hardships, is just littered with kind people who went out of their way to be kind to me with no aspect of getting anything back in return. They were just kind because they could be. And I'm so happy they were. So despite all of that, right, like I had these huge aspirations of like being on stage at the Met, right? And I'm clearly not there. But something that you mentioned to me off camera a while ago has stuck with me, right? That you were like, oh, you're living the dream. And I was like, no, I'm not. Because to me, I'm not on stage, right? Like I am sometimes, but I'm not on stage like all the time, which was my goal. But you made a good point that like from where I came from, I'm doing fantastic. Like, which I hadn't thought about, right? Where it's just like, I am working in my career field. I have people in my life who are kind and loving and will help me if I'm having like difficulties with like thinking things through sometimes, which is something that came from my background is like not being able to trust my own decisions and things like that. So having like a good support group of people who help me bounce ideas off of them and having some like tools in place to help me learn to trust my own decisions is helpful for me. Yeah. But just I have those things in place and it's just opportunities I wouldn't have if I was still engrossed in the situation I was in with my parents, where it's like, right, I lost a lot of relationships that were important to me. Like I've talked a lot about my relationship with my dad and I don't talk to him at all. And it's in part because I know if I do, I am in grave danger of sliding back into the life I had before, which I don't want to have. Yeah. This is objectively a healthier life for me. And it's like I personally had to cut someone out of my life that was super important to me. But what I gained out of that, my sense of safety, like I'm not constantly afraid all the time anymore. That it's amazing. And it's just like, it's important to recognize that even if your life isn't what you initially thought it would be, or it's not where you wanted it to be, you should take into consideration the amazing wins you do have. Right. Like, so I just wanted to say that. And thanks for bringing that up and bringing that to my attention.
Yeah, because like I said, you know, I was thinking I was going to be an animator. Like, that'd be cool in hindsight. Like, it'd be neat, but it would be where I'm at now. Mm-hmm. And where I'm at now is pretty good.
Yeah.
You
We
know,
help
and
a lot
it
of
is
people.
better than living the life that I was. You know, just being another drone, you know, doing
Yeah.
stuff for Jehovah's Witnesses. So I'm happy with where I'm at.
Yeah. Me too.
And I'm still working to make things more and more of where I'd like them to be, but you know, it's the journey, not the destination sometimes.
And that's the fun of it, right? Like,
Yeah.
you get to make that decision. Like, that's something my teachers really tried to like drill into me as a kid, especially when you're studying music and you get higher and higher into like the very intricate things about music. Like, you're aiming for perfection, but everyone knows on some level you're not going to get there. It's about the technique you use to get to where you are. It is
Right.
about that day-to-day work to get to the amazing skill set that you have or the life that you have, right? Like, that journey of being able to make those decisions for yourself, to choose where you want to go and how you want to get there and with who you want to go with, it's amazing. And it's worth the trade-off, is what I would say.
Mhm.
Like, there's definitely a rough patch when you first leave that situation where you
Yeah.
can be very scared or very uncertain, but it's worth
very
it
alone.
coming through that. Yes. I moved out of my parents' house. I didn't tell them I was moving. I finally saved up enough money, and a complete and utter stranger, helped me move out of my parents' house. Got me a nice apartment. A person my parents didn't know was a person that was a friend of mine, helped me move out. And I got set up with like a lot of stuff I didn't even have or wouldn't have known to get for my first apartment by a complete stranger. They just left it there for me to have. And even like money for my first like load of laundry. Just so nice. But my point is, I was still terrified. I was terrified my parents would find out where I lived and would find a way to like get access to this building and like harass me every day. I woke up with like nightmares for like a month after that. But yeah, that's how grossly it like enmeshed my family is. And that, like, just is hard. It's really hard. But I had a good group of friends who helped me put some things in place, helped me get used to being alone, which was something I wasn't used to. And they were there to be supportive of me when I needed help. And all I can say is like the trade-off is super worth it. So if you have the opportunity to make a life decision that's good for you, I would say do it. I know it's so scary and it's so hard, but please do it.
Yeah.
Please do it. Like, your life will be better in the long run for it. So
Excellent. Well, I've got about 5 minutes before I have to go. So I like to ask people the question, which is, if you could go back and tell your younger self a word of advice or anything you would want to say, what would it be?
you're going to be okay.
You're going to be okay. I think that's good advice.
That's what I needed to hear. You're going to be okay.
And you are. It sounds like you're doing okay.
Yeah, I'm doing okay.
So I want to thank you for sharing your insight into cult life and, you know, how those things affected you and where you ultimately are in your life now, that you're in a better place.
Yeah. I hope I could be helpful.
I think this was definitely helpful. And I'm hoping to do more and more of these interviews on the channel. So if you are a regular viewer, expect to see more you know, experiences from people who have gone through similar things, and just to know that even if we don't come from the same background, we have something valuable that we can provide for each other, and that is solidarity and you know, shared experience and good times.
Yeah.
So feel free, if you come from one of these groups and you like to share, you know, to make some friends, basically, feel free to join the Discord. That's the Apostate Coalition, and we'd be happy to have you. So thanks again for doing this little interview here. Sorry, it's a little shorter than I intended to, but
It's okay. I
it was
ramble
good.
too much
It was
anyway.
we all do.
Yeah.
So thank you, and we'll catch you next time. Bye for now.
Bye.
Okay, and recording.
Tomorrow's a new day. I will find a way. What if this was your destiny?